we go. I'm going to record it and I'm going to send it to you so that you can watch it again. You can refer back to it. I don't know about you, but whenever I do workshops, calls, whatever, I probably take 2 or maximum 3 main takeaways from the call. And the rest I think, oh, I don't really understand that, or I didn't really get that, or I wish I'd listened to that one a bit more carefully. So you're going to get the recording after this. So for this session, just sit back, relax, know that the important information for you just now will arrive and will stay with you, and you can always go back to it at any point. So with that said, let me start sharing. Presentation. Okay, whoop, go right back to the beginning. Right, January workshop, 2 core developmental / biological concepts underneath your child's emotions and behaviours. And it's like anything, when we know the why behind what's going on, not only can we kind of then work our way out of the situation because we're at the root, we know then instinctively often what support needs to happen to get us out of that. But also it's so applicable to so many different situations for your child. So hopefully you're going to take away some really exciting, interesting nuggets today. Okay, what we're going to cover, a little bit about me and what I do, the 3 core concepts of why children misbehave, the basics of brain development, the basics of the nervous system. I've actually swapped those around. So it's the basics of the nervous system first and then the basics of brain development, an overview of solutions. And then, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to tell anybody who is interested a little bit about my Empowered You course, which is my 3-month offering, which some of you on this call have done. Yeah, it goes really, I'll tell you more about it later. And if you have to go, or if you've got the information you need to stay and you know that the Empowered You is not for you just now, I'm not going to be offended. Please don't feel you have to stay on the call, okay? I'd love you to, but if it's not for you, I totally get it. Okay, so a little bit about me. So housekeeping, chat function is on. So please do, if they've got questions that you want to ask, please do put them in there. Jules will stop me intermittently when she feels it's appropriate and ask me any questions. Jules, can you just check that you can unmute yourself, because I did mute everybody.
I'm here.
Yeah, you're there, fine. Thank you. Is everybody comfortable? Has everybody been to, you can tell I worked in the school, been to the loo? Have you all got a drink? Have you got a comfortable chair? You know, make sure, we're going to be here for half an hour, so make sure that you are comfortable. If you need to have a little wiggle, a little stretch, just get yourself really comfortable and settle in. What other housekeeping do I need to tell you? I'm recording. Some faces may appear on the recording. If you really don't want that to be you, I can see on my screen at the moment that there are a few faces. I was hoping that it would just be the presentation of my face, but for whatever reason, it's not allowing me to do that just now. So please do turn off your camera if you don't want that to be you. Okay, my story and background. So being a parent and parenting coach, so they're one in the same thing, but they're 2 kind of sides of what I do. I help parents to come back into their bodies, to understand emotionally what is going on for them. Often when you've got a child who is really struggling or is presenting with challenging behaviours, you get to the point where you feel totally depleted, totally helpless, totally powerless. And part of my role is to bring your sparkle back, to bring your spark back, to get some nourishment back into your system in whatever way that needs to happen. I'm also just a really gentle, hopefully, place for you to land, for you to share what's going on that week or that day, for you to be a sounding board for you, to just support you while we work together through the process of unraveling all the things that are going on for your child and your family. And then parenting wise, I'm trained by the Peaceful Parenting Institute in New Zealand. I'm certified by them. So all of the core concepts and foundations of their understanding of parenting, I am trained in to help you, again, unwind the situation. So being a parent and parenting coach is kind of the third evolution of my career. Way back when I worked in beauty PR and I worked with Jules, that's how we know each other. Then I worked in a school for over 10 years. And while I was there, I created and developed and led the mental health and wellbeing department, which was really highly regarded and was noted in both the Ofsted and SciAMS reports. So I'm really proud of that. And then 2020 hit. And in the school, I was mainly running interventions for children. So I was mainly working in groups and one-to-one with children who were struggling in some way. Then 2020 hit. I had to shield and I couldn't work with the children that needed me and needed me even more at that time, actually. So I started running Zoom sessions for them. And then a little bit later on, when I wasn't shielding, when schools were shut down, I would go to their houses, I would work with their parents, etc., etc. And that kind of built from there. I was working out externally from school as an emotion coach as well as in school. And then I just got the courage, I guess, to set up on my own. I saw the difference that it made having parents on board and getting the parents' perspective, because in schools often when your child is seen by somebody for support, you don't get much interaction with that person. You don't get much, you don't get to tell them what's going on for you or things that you think might be really important for them to know. So I loved that aspect and I started working privately. And then the parents were saying to me, what you're doing is really great and I can see it's helping, but what do I do? And actually what I would do therapeutically in a session with children doesn't always transfer to how you would parent, what you would do parenting wise to support your child. So I did some additional training and now I'm a parent and parenting coach, although I do still work with some children one-to-one. I have always suffered with anxiety from as little as I can remember. And over the years have really done so much work on myself, so much training for myself and so much training within the role that I was doing in school and privately. So that's what I'm bringing to this, not only training and understanding from a kind of head-based perspective, but a real felt sense of, I know how it feels to be a child who is struggling emotionally. I know how it feels to be an adult who's been struggling emotionally. I get it. I really get it. I also have kind of identified more recently within the past 5 years as a highly sensitive person. And we might go into that a little bit more later. Most of you might know a little bit about that, but essentially your nervous system takes in more information from the world around it and you process things on a bit of a deeper level. And that often goes hand in hand with feelings of anxiety or anxiety-led behaviours in children, or children who are having a lot of meltdowns and seem very angry about everything. So I think I've kind of gone through who I support, how I work. There's 2 ways of work or 3 ways of working with me at the moment. I see very few children currently one-to-one, but I do see children one-to-one. I offer troubleshooting sessions for any problems that you just feel, oh, I've kind of got a handle on this, but I just want to check in with somebody who knows. I am worried about it and I want to make sure I'm doing the right things going forward. And then I offer my Empowered You course, which is the 3-month program, which goes really in depth. Any child that's been struggling for more than 6 months, I would recommend that we do the Empowered You course if it's available to you. Okay. So, whistle stop tour. Why do children misbehave? These 3 reasons, I have never encountered a situation where it doesn't boil down to one of these 3 things. Okay, the child is trying to fulfill a legitimate need. Okay, we all have core needs as human beings. We've got basic needs like food, like sleep, like connection. Okay, and then we've got kind of more arbitrary needs or needs that we don't put as much emphasis on in terms of importance. Things like playfulness. We all need playfulness in our lives. It really nourishes us. Things like autonomy. We need a sense of agency and autonomy in our lives. We all like to feel in control. Nobody likes to feel powerless. So a child will be trying to fulfill one of those legitimate needs through their misbehavior. And when we hear the word misbehavior, often we equate it to naughty, don't we? But actually, if you think about the word misbehave, just like something like misdirect, it just means you've not quite met the mark. You've not understood it. You've kind of not quite got it. So it's just, I've not quite got the behavior. It's not naughty, okay? 2, the child doesn't understand or remember the expectations or reasons behind it. So young children, this is really obvious for. Often we give younger children a lot more leeway when they make a mistake in their understanding and their behavior is inappropriate in a situation. But even older children, because they just haven't been in the world as long as we have, because they just don't know the subtext of situations, the context of things, why we're asking them to do things. Often just explaining our why can go a long way to helping a child to be able to meet our expectation. The other thing that comes into play in this one is if we've got a child who has executive functioning difficulties, which often looks like autism or ADHD, both of those, there are executive functioning delays or difficulties. So essentially what's happening is their impulses are kind of come out of them before their brain has had a chance to go, that's probably not a good idea. Or don't you remember mum or dad said you should be doing this? Okay, it's really, really hard for children, younger children, because they have executive functioning delays, and older children who have executive functioning difficulties to meet our expectations because the impulse is too strong and they've done it before they've thought about it. I often tell children who have got executive functioning difficulties when I'm working with them, I'm like, your brain is amazing. It's like a Ferrari, okay? You've got so many creative ideas that the brakes are a bit like a bicycle. So you've got this Ferrari engine driving you to do all these amazing creative things, but you've only got the brakes of a bicycle. So it's quite tricky. And then the third part is they have a backlog of unprocessed emotions that they are trying to resolve themselves, okay? A really good example and a really common example is during the school day, there is not an attuned adult that is consistently there for your child. There may be a lovely attuned adult, but they're trying to attune to and help and support 30, maybe more children in the class. And so for classrooms to work, children have to comply. It's just the way that it is. So for a lot of children, particularly our more sensitive children or our neurodiverse children, there's a lot of things that feel uncomfortable to them, or that they don't understand, or that they're just having really deep, tricky feelings about, and there's nowhere to go with that. So the only thing they can do is kind of squash it down. And then when they get home, you see something called restraint collapse. They get home and they're having meltdowns, or they are whining, or they are complaining, or they're being mean to their siblings. And often a lot of that is actually they've just got all this stuff stuck in their system. It's like wearing a backpack of rocks, okay? And those rocks need to come out because it's too heavy, and they're too immature by nature to be able to know exactly how to do that. So our job is to teach them, to discipline them, to make them our disciples. Okay, so nervous system basics. In very simple terms, the nervous system can be thought of as a cup. Okay, this is very, very basic. The reason we talk about nervous system capacity is because all of us only have a certain amount of capacity for stress in our system at any one time, before we get to the point where we feel overwhelmed, where everything feels like too much. And that's all human beings. That's not just children. I'm sure you can all recognize a time when perhaps there's been an awful lot going on in your life, or you've just had a day where everything's gone wrong, and you get to the end of the day and you can't help shouting at your children, okay? You can't help screaming into a pillow upstairs. You can't help snapping at your partner or whoever's in the house, okay? And it really feels to you like you can't help it. You're not in control of it. That's every human being. And stress on the nervous system doesn't have to be something unpleasant. Things that stress the nervous system can be exciting things too. Anything that kind of feels fizzy or buzzy, any kind of stimulation will add an amount of stress to our nervous system. Our capacity varies from day to day and life season to life season. So what you can cope with one day, you know, a week, a month, a year later, you might find yourself going, why can't I cope with this anymore? Why does this feel unmanageable? Why, when I do these simple tasks that I'm used to doing, why do I feel overwhelmed by them? Because you don't have the capacity. And if the water is the stress that's filling up your cup, you're sitting up here. And so very little things that normally wouldn't stress you out are sending you up to here and making you feel overwhelmed. We also all have differing baseline capacities based on other factors, and I've named some of them here. Sensory system differences. So I mentioned earlier that I would identify as highly sensitive. I feel things very deeply. I am very aware of lighting, smells, sounds. The world is kind of in 5D. That's not even a thing, but you know what I mean. It's really, really visceral to me. Everything feels really strong. And not only is my external world sometimes quite overwhelming, but my internal world can be quite overwhelming as well. I feel emotions really deeply. I feel in my body, and some of you are nodding along because you recognize this. I feel in my body when somebody in front of me is upset, angry, overwhelmed, anxious. I can feel that physically in my body. Okay, so sensory system differences. It might also be that your child has been diagnosed with sensory processing disorders or some sort of sensory delay. Developmental differences like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, all of those things, physical or mental disabilities, and trauma. If we think about it, if you've got any of those things and other things as well, when you wake up in the morning, your cup is already full. Your body is constantly trying to process and deal with those things that are already sitting in their system. So it makes sense for a child who is still developing, who has a real lack of control about the world around them, who's kind of forced to do things that feel overwhelming for them a lot, to have meltdowns, to feel very anxious, more quickly than others, because the stresses in their cup fill up. So for example, if a child who, let's say, has autism, goes into school in the morning, by the time they get to school, their cup is already a good third full, okay? They go into the classroom, it's really noisy, and there's kind of a flickering on the interactive whiteboard that's driving them nuts. That fills their cup. There's a child next to them that's being a bit mean and elbowing them. That's filling it up, okay? Then break time comes, and all the social rules that they don't understand and the lack of structure, that feels too much. And then they end up hitting somebody, or they end up having a meltdown. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because there's just not the capacity in their cup. When a child is sitting close to or is at the top of their cup, they will experience big feelings and act out with big or inappropriate behaviours. Okay, so if a child is sitting here, if you've got a child who is consistently feeling anxious, consistently tearful, consistently picking at their brothers and sisters, consistently having meltdowns or is angry, seems to go from 0 to 100, you can bet your bottom dollar it's because their nervous system is sitting up here all the time. So it just takes very little for them to flip into overwhelm. When they reach their upper limits of their cup, they are functioning from the lower parts of their brain. Okay, so we'll go into brain development now. Jules, any questions so far? No, perfect. Okay, well, not perfect. You're very welcome to put questions in. Brain development basics. At birth, only 25% of the brain is developed. And those parts are largely the brain stem, which is our basic functions like breathing, heart rate, sleep, consciousness, and our limbic brain, which is that's our emotional center. The neocortex, this huge part up here, is barely developed at all at birth. And the human brain isn't fully developed until early adulthood, somewhere between 25 and 28 years, which is good in some ways and tricky in others, right? Okay, so we've got a long time we've got a long time to wait until our child's brain is fully developed, which means, you know, they are going to have immature behaviors and immature responses because they just aren't wired to be an adult yet. But it also means if there are tricky things going on just now, you've got plenty of time to ensure that they are emotionally and relationally healthy adults. Oh my gosh, you've got so much time. And even in adulthood, what we know now is that neuroplasticity is a real thing. Our brain can rewire and remodel itself depending on the inputs that it's getting, even into late adulthood. So the neocortex, the part that isn't developed at birth, is our human brain. The neocortex controls things like, or is responsible for things like language recognition, self-reflection, problem solving, empathy. All of the things that make us human are in the neocortex. And if we think about, I'll go into that in a minute, but the next region down, which I highlighted before, is the limbic region, and that's our mammalian brain. That's the part that we share with all the mammals on the planet, and that is to do with connection, attachment. It's to do with emotional responses, all of those things. Our amygdala is stored there, our hippocampus, if anyone knows any bits and bobs about the brain, those things are all stored there. Then the brain stem is our reptilian brain. It's when we were lizards millions of years ago. That part was still in us. And as I said before, that part is responsible for very basic functions like our digestive system, like breathing, like our heart rate, all of those things. Some of you, in fact, many of you, I'm just looking at the screen now, may have come across this before, the hand model of the brain, which was kind of coined by a brilliant researcher, more modern researcher called Dr. Daniel Siegel. And if you don't have to do it with me, but it is quite nice to. If you just put your hand like that, tuck your thumb in and put your fingers over the top of your thumb, so it's kind of squeezing it. This is called the hand model of the brain. Oh, you're brilliant. Thank you so much for joining in. I love a bit of audience participation. Okay, our brain stem is this bit here. Our limbic region is this part here, and our neocortex sits over the top. Now, as an adult, the majority of the time, someone's just joining in. Let me let them in. As an adult, the majority of the time, we are in a kind of connected brain state. The neocortex is connected to the limbic brain and the brainstem, because as we develop, not only does the neocortex develop, but this kind of metaphorical staircase or staircase of neurons between each of the parts of the brain develops, so they become really well stuck together. So it takes much more for an adult to become overwhelmed and do something like flipping their lid, we call this. So when this part comes unstuck, we flip our lid. When we flip our lid, this part of our brain, the part that makes us human, is not connected to the limbic or the brain stem anymore. Okay, we find it much harder to take in linguistic information. We find it much harder to problem solve. We find it much harder to self-reflect. Okay, we're acting on impulse a lot of the time when we're in that part of our brain. And often when I'm working with parents, they'll say to me, and I'm really aware of the time actually, just everybody, this is going to go on a bit longer than half an hour. It is going to be recorded. So if you need to go, please do, but I do apologise. My timekeeping skills are not the best. Parents will often say to me, when my child is in this state, they look to me like a wild animal, like their face changes, the whole way their body is. You know, they might be arching their back, they might be physically moving in a way that's very like a wild animal. And I say, yeah, because we are animals, and they are acting from their mammalian and reptilian brain. They're not acting from their human brain. And you'll notice the difference in them. You can see it. You'll go, oh, they're themselves again when this part is connected back on. Okay. What else do I need to tell you about that? The other thing that I often say to children is that as we get older and as we develop, this part of the brain can hug these parts of the brain. So when we've got a big feeling, the neocortex looks after the limbic and the reptilian part of the brain, and it can speak to them and it can say to them, oh, Jenny, you're feeling really stressed. What you need is a cup of tea and to phone a friend. Okay, that's going to really help you to feel less overwhelmed. But when children are very little, that the mechanics and the joining together of these parts just isn't there. So they do flip their lids more easily. And when they're at the top of their capacity in their cup, they're flipping their lid far more easily. You're seeing the mammalian reptilian parts of their brain. Top down and bottom up approaches. Okay, a top down approach is which is often what we go in with first when we're trying to help children with big behaviors, is trying to use logic with them, trying to get them to see a different perspective, trying to get them to understand that what they're doing isn't okay and that it's irrational and blah, 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 blah. That's fine if the neocortex is connected to the limbic brain and the brainstem, if they are integrated. We can use language, we can use reasoning, we can use problem solving with them. But the majority of the time when a child is acting out, that part isn't online. These parts of the brain only understand sensory information. They are constantly scanning the room, the environment for safety. Am I safe? Which is why when I work with parents, I often say to them, try not to think, how can I help them calm down? Try to think, how can I help them to feel safe? Because we can, even if it's anger, even if it doesn't look like they're scared, even if it looks like they're cross, that's driven by anxiety often, and they're in this part of the brain. So a bottom-up approach is a sensory approach. It's, are we in a crowded space? Are they feeling overwhelmed by the amount of people? Do I need to take them somewhere else? Is my tone of voice gentle? Am I in my system feeling threatening to them because I'm angry, I'm tense, my voice, my jaw is clenched, my voice is a little bit short? Because if it is, that is going to be absolutely picking up on that, and the lid is going to stay flipped. Okay, this can only come down when the sensory cues tell these parts of the brain they're safe, they're okay. And what that means for you is actually when a child is presenting with big feelings or big behaviors, whether that's tears, whether that's anxiety, whether that's anger, it kind of takes the pressure off you in the moment. You don't have to solve the problem in the moment. You don't have to discipline in the moment. You don't have to teach them new skills or tell them what they should do differently in the moment, because actually that's futile. The learning part of the brain is totally offline. There is no point trying to rationalize and reason with a child that is really struggling emotionally. What you want to do is help them to calm down, and that's going to model to them for the future how to calm themselves down more quickly. And then once that's integrated, you'll see the change in them. You'll know from their body language, from their facial expression, from the tone of their voice that they're integrated. Then you can have conversations about, oh, that was hard. What do we need to do next time? Or what support do you need next time for that not to happen? Or if that happens again, could we try this? Whatever it is you need. The teaching can happen later. The teaching also doesn't have to happen within the hour. It doesn't have to happen the next day. It can happen whenever you feel is a good time to have that conversation, when the brain is integrated. Okay, so with all of that information, what do we do? Two of the most helpful ways to support the nervous system and developing brain are, one, looking at environmental factors. When a flower doesn't bloom, we don't blame the flower, we fix the environment. Yeah? The second one is peaceful parenting, and you can call it what you like: responsive parenting, gentle parenting, peaceful parenting. They're all essentially the same thing. They are parenting with attachment and attunement in mind. Attachment, again, most of you probably know a little bit about this, if not a lot about this, is a phrase coined by, or a theory coined by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, and it's about the fact that our relational development happens in the very early stages of our life, or starts to happen in the very early stages of our life, and how we relate to our parents and how our parents relate to us sets us up for our emotional and relational patterns later on in life. Okay, you might know a little bit about attachment theory, and there are four main attachment types. There is anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, and secure attachment. We are all aiming for secure attachment, and if that isn't possible for many reasons, children aren't able to access that secure attachment at birth, and that is nobody's fault. Often it's, parents are not coping, and that is human, that's okay. Those attachment patterns we now know can shift as children grow up. And attunement is, am I able to be in touch with what is going on for my child, what their intentions were in the situation, what feelings might be going on for them, why did they behave in that way, and what do I need to do to help support them? What support do they need? So when we look at environmental factors, we're looking at things like physical environments. Are the environments that they are spending the majority of their time in meeting their needs to a greater degree? Okay, we are never going to, particularly, we've had lots of conversations, I've had lots of conversations with parents and friends this week about school systems and what's the word, where they have to be in attendance, all of those things. Okay, lots of children are struggling with the school environment at the moment. Schools and the environment, not the teachers are amazing, but the way that the school system is set up is just not fit for purpose anymore. It's not working for so many children, but for many children it's enough. Okay, they're getting enough support, they're getting enough attunement, they're getting enough nourishment from their days at schools. Sensory inputs, so if they are highly sensitive, they're going to be overstimulated more easily. Is the environment for them too loud? Is it too busy? Is the day just too long for them? And there are only we can't control everything within those factors, particularly within the school environment. We really can't. But what can we control, and how can we support them? Relationships, community is really, really important for children. Relationships with a number of adults and other children is so nourishing. We are wired to be tribal beings. We are wired for community. And when we don't feel part of a community, we really struggle. I was speaking to a friend today, in fact, about the fact that her little boy has just gone to secondary school this year and has been really struggling with wanting to go in, and actually the crux of it was that he wasn't feeling attuned. He didn't have a group of friends that he really felt were there for him, and because he's new, he hadn't formed relationships with many of the teachers yet, and now the school have been amazing and have really supported him and set him up with a new group of friends. He's a different child. He's back to the little boy that his parents knew him to be. So relationships are really important. Scheduling. In the world that we live in today, most of us feel overscheduled, and our children feel overscheduled, and it really impacts on our capacity. So if our child is struggling, if they're sitting at the top of their capacity cup, how can we reduce some of the scheduling in their lives? It's often the first thing I look at with parents when I'm working with them, is where in your life can you reduce things? Not what more can you do, Where can you take things out? Rest is really important, and rest doesn't just look like sitting in front of the TV, reading a book, sleeping. Rest can be active, rest can be mindful movement, rest can be play, rest can be creativity. Stimulation, we talked a little bit about that before, but environments that are overstimulating, we often need destimulation for our children, particularly when they're working at the top of their cup. They need less stimulation. Movement, really important for all of us. Really helps again with our sensory system. Our proprioceptive system is the system that looks for the pressure on our joints and our muscles, okay, and it's a really regulating system. It really helps our body to feel safe. So increasing proprioceptive input in terms of movement, pushing, pulling, being put upside down, all of those things are going to help to regulate the system. And diet, okay, a diet that has less sugar in it, particularly if your child is highly sensitive or neurodiverse, reducing sugar to whatever degree you can, and I know that's really hard with children, is going to help. If they are having sugar, make sure it's balanced out within the same meal with some vegetables and some protein, so they're not getting that sugar spike. Anybody a Glucose Goddess fan here? Yeah, you might. You'll already know a little bit about that. Okay. An overview of solutions in terms of peaceful parenting. The foundations of peaceful parenting are the 3 C's. They are center, connect, and communicate. The centering is not about being calm. I never expect you to be calm. That's an impossible task, especially when you're dealing with a child who's having big feelings and big behaviors. But it is about being connected to what's going on inside of you. It's about being self-aware and attuned to yourself, noticing, wow, I'm finding this really, really hard, and I'm going to shout in a minute, actually, if I don't leave the situation. Leaving the situation, unless there's a safety issue, is always fine, and it's great modelling. I work with so many parents that when they start doing this, they notice their child, when they're having a big feeling, just as I just need to go to my room for 5 minutes, mummy, and it's not a punishment, it's that I just need the space. I need to be in my own body and without you here. So it's about nourishing and nurturing ourselves, not just in those tricky moments, but prior to those tricky moments. So throughout the day, checking in with yourself. Where is my cup? Okay, if I'm 70% full and I've got to pick the kids up from school, and I know that there's going to be some restraint collapse and there's going to be some sibling rivalry and all of that stuff, I'm going to get to there very, very quickly, and I'm going to shout, or I'm going to feel overwhelmed, or I'm going to feel tearful, or any, you know, however your system responds, that's what's going to happen. So it's really making sure that you are well nourished, not just for parenting, but just for yourself. Then it's connecting, and these have to go in this order. So the centering is the most important part at first, unless there's a safety issue, okay? If one child is going at another child with a brick, you have to step in, okay? If one child's about to bite another child, you have to step in. Safety first. If it's tricky, not tragic, then it's the center, okay? What do I need? Connect. Attune to your child's experience. We want our child to always be feeling that they are a good kid having a hard time. We want them to feel that that's how we see them, because that's how their inner voice is then going to develop as they get older, and it's going to mean that they are much more emotionally and relationally resilient, okay? When we are compassionate to ourselves, when our inner voice is one of compassion rather than criticism, we don't tend to struggle with things like anxiety, depression, all of those things, because our self-concept and our ability to soothe ourselves is much greater, and we can instill that in our children, okay? That can be a protective factor for them as they get older. So connecting to them. Why did you hit your brother? You must have been having a really hard time. Oh, I see, that's your favorite toy. I didn't realize that. You were playing with it the other day and you absolutely love it. And then he picked it up and it just didn't feel good because it feels like it's yours. Oh, you know it's not okay to hit. A great phrase to use when you are working with a behavior that's been inappropriate is, I know it's not okay to. We're speaking to their goodness, because when they are in this brain, they do know that it's not okay to. This is who they are. That is not who they are. That is, they are overwhelmed. Okay, and only when a child has felt connected to you, because connection is one of the biggest factors, the greatest factors that's going to bring that back online. It helps us to feel safe. Just think about it. When you're having a really hard time and somebody says to you, oh my God, that's awful, I can't believe that, what can I do? Your system goes, oh my God, I've been seen, somebody gets it, somebody's here to help. Okay, if we go in with, you know, if you've complained to your other half or somebody in your family, your mum or something, and you say, oh, this was awful, and Susan at work was a right old cow, and da-da-da, and she went, well, have you seen it from Susan's perspective? You'd go, and it would keep your brain like this. Okay, it's not safe. So connection is key. Only when a child is feeling connected and safe, then you can communicate, and that might look like joint problem solving. When we are communicating, it's really helpful to always work as if we are a team. Okay, sometimes children need us to be the authority because that helps them feel safe, but if it's been an inappropriate behavior, there is usually an amount of shame that goes with it. They know that they didn't behave well, they know they didn't want to be doing that. So when we can say, buddy, you are having a hard time, what could we do? Have you got any ideas? Rather than, right, next time this happens, what you need to do is blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. You know, it's like anything. When a child makes their own decision about something or feels like they've made their own decision about something, they're much more likely to do it. When a child feels like they've been dictated to, not much interest. Family meetings can be really helpful. Loving limits, gentle, peaceful, responsive parenting is absolutely about firm limits. It is not wishy-washy. It is not, oh, darling, you're having such a hard time all the time. But the limits are often set before the behavior happens. They're preemptive. You know, they are, we're going to the supermarket, you are going to want all the plastic crap on the magazines, and today we are not getting a magazine. We're going to get your favorite yogurt, but we're not getting a magazine. You're setting them and yourself up for success. And it's really helpful if you can try and see it as you and your child against the problem. The problem is the problem. Your child is not the problem. So if you can flip it and see it as, you know, this is consistently happening, this is a problem, you're struggling with this, what do you need to be able to meet expectations? Okay, so
Jen,
yes,
Catherine had a question
yes.
quite a way back. It's in the chat. It's the first one in the chat.
Going to the chat, thank you.
I don't know if Catherine's still on the call or could send it if you can't see it.
If you're not, how do we help young boys with forgetfulness and lack of learnt habits, e.g. teeth wash, hair, even sleep habits not working, possibly ADHD? Yeah, if you suspect there's ADHD there, then they are going to really struggle with that, because it's part of the executive function, it's part of the time management, the memory recall, all of those things. There are lots of different ways that we can help them with that. And unfortunately, in a call like this, because I don't know the specifics of the situation or your little boy, I can't really offer you very helpful information. But email me and I will come back to you. Give me a little bit more information, Catherine, if you're still on the call, and I will try and come back to you on that with a little bit more information. Love the glucose goddess. Sometimes it's hard to put into practice though. Yes, sometimes all of this is hard to put into practice, and it takes time, and we have to be patient with ourselves as well as our children. Okay. Any other questions before I move on to telling you a little bit about Empowered You? And if you do, if that's enough for you today, you need to go, please feel free to. It doesn't look like anybody's typing. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Empowered You. So Empowered You, my spring term enrolment is happening just now. You are not too late. If you want to sign up for 3 months of one-to-one, completely tailored, completely individual support, then you do have time. I will be enrolling until the end of January. So there's just a quote here from a client that I've worked with. The Empowered You course should be mandatory for every parent. Literally everything has shifted now that I understand what's going on developmentally and psychologically. I could not recommend this program more. It's life-changing. I often get parents saying to me, why doesn't everybody know this stuff? why are we just not taught this stuff? Why are we left to kind of struggle on and come to our own conclusions? And I also often get parents saying, I wish I'd done this sooner. I've been kind of watching you on Instagram for a year or so, and things have been really hard, and I've just been hesitating, and I wish I'd done this sooner because we've had a year of hell and we didn't need to. Okay, what is it? It's not your typical course. I often hesitate to call it a course. I run it as a course for a couple of reasons. A, because I do cover off the foundations of peaceful parenting. You do get all the basic information that you need to be able to approach any challenging situation going forward. I also call it a course because I run it 2 to 3 times a year, and within those periods, within those blocks of time, I factor in, I kind of cap the amount of people that I will take on at any time, because I'm working really deeply with every family or parent that I work with. I need to make sure that I have the capacity, okay? So I'm not going to take on more people than I have the capacity to hold that space for, because it's not just for the time of the sessions. You know, as a highly sensitive person, I find it really difficult to not deeply process everything that's been going on in our session, to think about you outside of sessions, to send ideas and resources. You are held by me in mind in my life for the 3 months we work together. I meet every single person exactly where they're at with the information, insights and styles of working together that are just for them. I am trained in and have experience of so many other disciplines than peaceful parenting. I've done mindful self-compassion work, I've done internal family systems work, I've done somatic experiencing work, and I bring all of that to my sessions, and I absolutely meet you where you are at with what you and your family needs. It is not a 7-step process to blah-de-blah-de-blah, because human beings are more complex than that. And sometimes that is helpful, and sometimes people like that approach, and there is structure to the course, but it's very flexible as well. The course is potentially for you if your child is having frequent meltdowns, struggling to manage feelings of anger, frustration, rage, suffering from anxiety or phobias, tearful, seems to be constantly worrying, consistently overreacting, lashing out at siblings or you physically and verbally, strong-willed to the point that it's affecting your enjoyment of parenting them, an angel at school but challenging at home, that's a big one, or vice versa. Sometimes children find it much easier at home and find school incredibly challenging and don't have the capacity to shut down those feelings at school, so it comes out. Refusing to go to school, clubs, activities, or sleep in their own bed. A child who seems to go from 0 to 100 for very little reason. Presenting with difficult or inappropriate behaviours, is highly sensitive, always neurodiverse, or you suspect that they are. I've done specific training on highly sensitive children. And what we know about children who have neurodiversities is that they all have highly sensitive nervous systems. So when you are working with me, we will go into the nuts and bolts of what it is to live with a highly sensitive nervous system and how life needs to be a bit different, or our strategies for parenting need to be a bit different. Not responding well to traditional methods of parenting, or if you are finding parenting frustrating, overwhelming, joyless, rage-inducing, tear-inducing, anxiety-inducing. So many of the parents that I work with come to me in a state of complete depletion, okay? And that's really important to work on first, or at least alongside. Oh, what have I done? You're still there. Some of what you'll learn, the nuts and bolts of the 3 C's, which are going to be your compass in all parenting situations. We go really into depth of all the different insights and tools that come into each one of those. How to let go and control and use connection. More on why yours and your child's nervous system is key. How to bring more joy and cooperation. Again, how to specifically support a child who has a highly sensitive nervous system, how to set loving limits and boundaries with ease. That's one of the hardest things to do. But when we work together, you will find it much more easy. The basics of child development, oh my goodness, when you understand the whys behind, and we've covered some of them today, but there are obviously many, many more in different ages and stages as well. It will completely change your perceptions around their behaviours, and therefore how you feel towards them when those behaviours are coming to the forefront. How to navigate meltdowns and big things like confidence in your own ability to handle future challenges, awareness of and compassion for your own internal world. So many people that do this course come out saying, not only has it really helped my child, and not only have I learned so much about them, but I have learned so much about myself. And I'm so much more kind to myself than I ever have been before. Okay, the nuts and bolts, the details. 3 months of one-to-one support tailored specifically to you and your child. That's comprised of 8 one-to-one sessions with me at my office or on Zoom, email support between sessions anytime you need, and resources and information. After each call, I will go away, and as I said, I'll hold you in mind, and I will be looking for and looking back on my resources and all the things that I've got in stock, what's going to be really helpful for you, and I will send you those resources. And even if you can't read them now, you've got a file to refer back to. I remember this article that Jenny sent on this, maybe that will help in this situation. And it's £800 for that. So those of you that are still here,
You had one more question, Jen.
oh, I'm so sorry. Oh gosh, I've got lots of people.
Yeah, lots of them are people who've had to go, but there's a question in there that came from Lucy's iPhone. If you could just have a quick.
If your child is punching and hitting and removing yourself, she follows how to resolve. If she's little enough, you can hold her. Okay, often flipping a child the other way so that their back's to you and you've got them in we call it careful seize. So whenever you're using your hands or your arms on a child, it's restraint training in schools, you can do careful seize. If that's making her worse, put a barrier between you. Some children, when you try and hold them, some children love the pressure, and it's that deep proprioceptive input and it calms them down. For some children, it makes them even worse. If that's the case, putting a barrier in between you, okay? You can't hit me, you can hit the pillow. Put her in front of the sofa, you behind the sofa. If you have to, put a door in between you and just say, I'm not leaving you, but you cannot hit me, sweetheart. I'm here, I'm listening to you. I'm here, I'm not leaving you. I know you're having a hard time, but you cannot hit me. But if they're little, trying to hold their little hands can be the most helpful thing you can do. I hope that's helpful, Lucy.
That was the only question. That was the only other question.
Cool. So thanks everybody for being here. It's been an absolute joy to be with you. Thank you for taking the time to be with me this morning. I hope you've learned some things. I hope there's been takeaways there that you think, yeah, that's going to be really helpful. I'll try and remember that, or I'll try and use that in future. I'm going to look up more information about that. If you want more free resources, please, if you're not already following me on Instagram, that is a really rich source of resources. There are also some free resources on my website, and I do offer free calls. So if you want to chat further about anything, or you're interested in working together, please do go to my website and have a look and book yourself in.
Don't cancel the call. Don't forget to stop the recording first.
Oh, good thought. Okay, I shall stop the recording. Thanks, Jules.